Hello, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me. This is Tony Lobianco with the Kentucky Post-School Outcome Center, and glad to have you with us today, assuming that you are all new YOYO interviewers. So that's exciting. Um, Hopefully you're here because your dose told you that you would be a YOYO interviewer this year. And if you're anything like me, when your boss tells you that you're going to be doing something new, it can not be the most pleasant thing to hear, but we hear from a lot of our interviewers that they actually enjoy doing this. It gives people a chance to connect with former students and talk with them about what they're doing with their life, and it can be a pretty positive experience all the way around. So we're going to go over a bunch of things. I'm going to share a PowerPoint with you all, and by the time we get to the end of the presentation, you will hopefully know everything that you need to know about being a YOYO interviewer. Oops. All right, so what we're going to cover today is we'll start off with why we collect post-school outcome data. Then we'll get into the how of how we do it, what your roles and responsibilities will be as interviewers, and we'll talk about what you will need to do to get into our system. We'll talk about how to contact former students. We will go over some interviewing skills, and we'll talk about how you can direct former students to resources that might help them where they're at in their life when you're talking to them. And then we will do a run through of our online system so you can see it in action and know what you'll be actually doing. And all of that in hopefully less than an hour and a half. So the why. Why do we collect post-school outcome data? First of all, it is a federal requirement. It's IDEA Indicator 14. Some of you are probably all too familiar with the various indicators that need to be reported on, but we are KIPSO. We are the contractor for Kentucky Department of Education to report this in accordance with the federal requirements. So that federal requirement is to report the number of students who had IEPs and exited the previous year and were either enrolled in higher education as Part A, Part B is either in higher education or competitively employed, and C is really any type of education or employment within a year of leaving high school. So that is what gets reported to the Office of Special Education Programs at the U.S. Department of Education. But it's more than that. It is also a state requirement. So Indicator 14, as I just basically read to you, is pretty short and just looks at the employment and education outcomes, which are very important outcomes to look at. But the Kentucky Department of Education goes a step further, and I think very wisely they go a step further because, I mean, that's got to be one of the top priorities for high schools throughout the state to prepare young persons for adult life. And they want to know more about how we're doing that for students with IEPs. So they contract with us to develop an instrument to collect secondary data being data that you collect, and then that data comes to us, we analyze it and we report on it. And when I said that we go several steps beyond what is required by the federal requirement for Indicator 14, we ask questions about residence, where a former student lives, what kind of support services they have and had in the past, and we ask about community engagement. And we also ask just a few other questions about employment and education and their overall life experience. So I think it's a very wise decision for KDE to want to know those things. And we of course, are in frequent contact with them to report back our findings. But I think the most important reason to collect post-school outcome data is that we want to be able to help districts and educators make informed decisions. So it's not just about checking a box. It's not just about meeting the requirements of the federal and state governments. It's about helping young people transition to adult life successfully. To that end, after we get the data that you all collect, we put together a whole bunch of different reports, and hopefully, I mean, some of you may be doses. If you're not, you can be the go-between between us and your dose to make sure that they know about what we offer. I mean, we do talk with doses quite a bit as well, but they're not always utilizing all the resources that that are available to them. So we create reports that are online. They may want you to be part of a team. I hope every district has a team to look at their data and to make decisions based on that. We have our own staff and our transition consultants throughout the state at the special ed co-ops that can work with you to identify ways to improve outcomes. And those kind of decisions will hopefully be based on the data that you are collecting. As an interviewer, you can provide access to resources to former students. So, it's not just an interview. It has a dual purpose of when you're asking them these questions, you may be able to offer something to them to help them in their life right now. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, a lot of people really get a lot of satisfaction out of just talking to former students and hearing these firsthand stories about the former students. That can be good in its own right, and it can also help broaden your own knowledge about how to help the next group of students that are coming through based on the experiences of former students. So how do we do it? Well, the YOYO, as we call it, the Youth 1 Year Out Former Student Interview, is an online interview. It has about 30 questions. You won't be asking all 30 questions. It'll guide you through the questions that you need to ask. I mean, if we ask if they have been employed since exiting high school, then it'll ask follow-up questions about employment. And if they're not employed, then it'll ask follow-up questions about lack of employment and what could have been done maybe to help them get employment if that was one of their goals. The system itself will tell you who to contact. We work hard with KDE to get a contact list of students so that you don't have to dig up all their information, but there's a good chance you'll still have to dig some of it up because it's not the best contact information. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a few minutes. We provide the best contact information that we have, but it's not always up to date. We get that information from KDE, and they get it from you, or they get it from your Infinite Campus system. Sometimes I think a student will enter in kindergarten and exit in grade 12, and their contact information won't have been updated at all between those 2 points in time. And one of the reasons that interviewers typically have problems contacting former students is because the contact information isn't correct. So we ask you to work with your Infinite Campus person or your attendance clerk or whoever it might be, and kind of put a bug in their ear to make sure you're getting contact information updated before they exit high school and at the end of their senior year, or if they're dropping out whenever they're going to exit. Try to get a way to contact them. The YOYO tells you what questions to ask them, and it directs you to support if that is something that is wanted or needed by the former student. So who should be in the population? When you log into the system, you'll see a list of the former students that need to be interviewed, and hopefully we have gotten it right. But all data systems are imperfect to some degree, and so there may be some that aren't. But here's who should be in your list. Any student that exited in the 2017-18 school year, they had to have had an IEP in place at the time that they exited, and exited by either graduation with a regular or alternative diploma, aging out of the system, or dropping out. A lot of times folks will come and they'll say, oh, this is the senior survey, right? And I'll say, no, well, first of all, it's not done during your senior year. It's done a year after that, and it's not necessarily a year after their senior year. It's a year after whenever they exited. So yes, you do have to interview someone that dropped out, or at least you have to try to interview someone that dropped out. If someone was on the alternate diploma track and even graduated with an alternate diploma, but then came back to receive additional services, then you wouldn't interview them until a year after they left, after probably reaching maximum age. So we work with KDE to try to identify former students and assign them to the correct district and have all the correct information and get the correct contact information, but it doesn't always work perfectly. So what do we do in those instances? Well, what are the most common instances where that will be the case? Let's say that a student exits in 2018, but then they re-enroll before the yo-yo starts. They ought to be removed. So that could happen in a case, like I mentioned, where someone left with an alternate diploma, but then they decided they wanted to come back for additional services. So they re-enrolled in school. They ought to not be there. If they dropped out and they came back, they should be removed. If they moved to another district and enrolled there, then they shouldn't be part of the yo-yo either. That can be a little bit tricky to document, because then it's, coordinating between two different school districts. Did they exit from the other district? Who's responsible for interviewing them? Those are some of the questions that frequently come up, but we'll talk about those. Sometimes there are students missing from your list. You might look at the list and say, well, where's so-and-so? So you'll need to contact us to have us add them to the list. And like I said, sometimes the contact information is not up to date, and you can help fix that for future years. So what do you do in the case where you need to add or delete students from the list that you see? Well, first of all, take a good hard look at them and make sure that you're really understanding the criteria for being included or not included. Because obviously we're a pretty small team. It's mostly just Judy and I that are dealing with adding and deleting former students, and trying to do so for 175 districts can be a little bit daunting if people don't really understand why students need to be added or deleted. But if you do see the students that are missing, by all means let us know. And the way to do that is on our website under resources. There's a document. It's an Excel spreadsheet. It's called Copy of Fields to Add Students, and you just fill out the information. It asks for their SSID, their name, their gender, ethnicity, disability type, school, those kinds of things. You can do it for one student. You can do it for 20 students. It doesn't really matter. But please don't email it to us. Email isn't the most secure way to transmit information. Upload it at our secure site at kipso.org, and I will show you where that is. It's you can go to our homepage. It'll say if you need to upload a secure file, do so here. But I'll show that to you. If you need to delete students, the process is a little bit more tricky. If you want to add students, I'm going to add them. There's no reason why I wouldn't add a student. If I find out later that they don't really belong in the yo-yo, then we'll take them out at that point. But I'll take your word for it, and we'll get them added right away. The only reason I wouldn't would be if they're already assigned to another district. But if you need to delete students, then we need some kind of documented reason for them to be deleted. And in most cases, it's because, like I said, they've re-enrolled in your own district. And if that happens, it's a pretty easy fix. Go to their Infinite Campus enrollment screen, take a screenshot of it, and upload it again at our secure server. If you've got a bunch of students that are in that category, you can only upload one file at a time. So you can do several entries like that, or you could paste them all into a Word doc and upload it as a single document. I would probably check with your DOS too, make sure that they're in agreement that these are students should be deleted. And when you do that, if you could put a little note saying this is why we think this person doesn't belong in the yo-yo. A lot of times it's because they've transferred to another district, and when that's the case, it takes a little bit longer, not on your end, but on mine, because I have to verify with KDE that they actually did enroll in the other district. Sometimes students will exit one district, say that they're going to enroll somewhere else, but if they never do, then they're considered a dropout. So they would still be in the yo-yo if that were the case, because we do interview dropouts. Um, the earlier you can do that, the better. I mean, the student list is populated now, so you can go in and do that before the yo-yo even starts. It starts April 1st, so if you can get it done before then, that would be great. It's obviously very difficult to switch a student to another district in the middle of the yo-yo process. They may have already completed all of their interviews, and as I'm sure you would understand, they don't take very kindly to having other students show up midway through the interview process. So in all cases, we'll have the final decision about who can be added or removed, and often we have to consult with KDE. Sometimes people don't like the decisions that we have to make, but we do have to abide by the rules to try to get everybody in the correct district and interviewed if they need to be interviewed. What are your roles and responsibilities as interviewers? So realize that being a yo-yo interviewer is a big responsibility. You are on the front lines of collecting data that tells us about what's going on with former students with disabilities across the state of Kentucky. I mean, when you see data cited in studies and in reports that are floating around schools, around districts from KDE, it is very likely that some of that data came from us if it's dealing with post-school outcomes for students with disabilities. And you guys are the ones that are doing it, that are getting it for us. We will collect, or you'll collect, but we'll compile reports for districts, state, and federal governments. Individuals' names aren't going to show up on those reports. Make sure students know that when you're interviewing them. We take privacy and confidentiality very seriously. We wouldn't want to expose anyone, so to speak, for saying something that they didn't want to have been made public, or even to identify them as having a disability at all. That's another reason why we ask you not to email us identifying information. If you want to email us an SSID, that's fine, but please don't email us names or anything that could identify who a student is. Like I say, with all these reports, there's important decisions that are going to be made based on them and on the recommendations that we make. So the fact that you're gathering the data for that is a pretty big job. Some people say, well, these are students that are already out of school. Why does collecting these data on them matter? Well, it matters because their experiences are going to help guide what we do to help the next batch of students that's coming through. And in some cases, it might even help the former student you're talking to during the interview. And of course, remember that you are probably, in doing the yo-yo, going to be the last person from the school to ever speak with this former student in an official capacity from the school. Again, you're the representative of the school district that is the last person to contact them, at least on an official basis from the school. So leave a good taste in their mouth about their experience in school. Let them know that you care about them, what they're doing with their life, and you want to make sure that you're helping to improve the services that your school district is offering. Confidentiality, I already said a little bit about, but make sure that they know that they are protected, that you're not going to share personal information about them, that we keep it confidential. Don't leave information laying around. You know, in the old days, that would probably be leaving paper lists or something on your desk, and maybe that still is the case for some folks. But you can just as easily, probably even more easily, leave your monitor on and have your list of yo-yo students up there, and then, you know, go out to get lunch. And in that case, you may have violated their confidentiality. You may have written something about their interview on there, and someone could see that and know something that they don't really have the right to know. So don't leave yo-yo materials in a public place. Don't allow unauthorized persons to look at them. You know, don't go home to your spouse or your kids and say, gosh, did you hear what happened to Billy? We thought he was going to do so well. And my God, he can't get a job for the life of him. it's not really a good thing to say. And I know folks a lot of times are coming from very small areas, small towns where everybody knows each other, and people talk, but if something's being shared in the process of doing this interview, keep that confidential, please. Notify your supervisor if you lose any confidential materials, and don't talk to anybody about who you interviewed or what they say. What happens in the yo-yo interview stays in the yo-yo interview. We'll talk about contacting former students. So response rates. Every interview is going to end in one of four ways. The best outcome, and the outcome that we hope for, is that you're going to make contact and complete an interview. And we typically have about a 60% response rate. It's actually dipped a little bit in the last few years. But 60 is kind of what we, we hope for more, but that's what we've come to expect. We know that you're not going to be able to get in touch with everybody, and everybody is not going to agree to be interviewed, but hopefully 60% of the time or more, you will. A second possibility is that you'll make contact, but they will refuse to be interviewed. We see that happen about 4% of the time. They'll actually talk to someone, you'll explain what you're going to do, and they'll say, no, I don't want to participate in that. And that is perfectly within their rights. You have to try to make contact, but they don't have to agree to participate in the interview. The biggest reason that interviews don't happen is because you're unable to make contact, and that can be for a variety of reasons. Like I said, it could be imperfect contact information, and that's something you can help us with in the future by getting better contact information. It could just be that they don't answer their phone. It could be that they see in the caller ID that you're calling from such and such a school district, and they say, I don't want to talk to anybody from there. I was done with that a year ago. And that's their right. It happens. We know that you're not all going to get 100% response rates. So, be aware of that. So, you can try calling at different times of the day. You can speak to a parent, guardian, if you're able to get a hold of them instead of the former student. We'll talk more about that in a few slides. The worst possible outcome is that you don't make any attempt to conduct an interview. That doesn't happen very often, but remember, because this is a federal and state requirement, we are required to report on how districts did at achieving this. So only about 1% of the time do we see this, but some districts just decide they're not going to do it. A lot of times that's poor communication within the district. Somebody thought there were two interviewers, and they weren't sure who was supposed to interview one kid, and they never ended up getting interviewed. Sometimes the district will just completely blow it off, which rarely happens, but it's pretty bad when it does. Not only because they're not meeting the requirement, but because they don't have that information to use in the future. So each of these rates is reported to the state. We understand that not everybody is going to be able to be contacted, but there's ways to increase response rates, but there's not an excuse for not making an attempt. So can you interview a family member? Yes, you can. If you can't get in touch with the former student, maybe they're always out, maybe they're away at school somewhere, maybe they're working all the time or something like that, you get a hold of the parent, but not the former student, go ahead and interview them. That's the case about a third of the time. When we get completed interviews, it's actually from a family member or not the former student. That's okay. But remember that it is the former student's answers that we really want, not the parents. I know that seems kind of like a difficult concept because, if you're talking to the parent, how can you get the former student's answers? But I think, in my own life, if I was 19 years old and someone was interviewing my father and he were to try to answer questions that someone was asking him about my life, if he was asking from his own point of view, he would say something very different than what he would say if he asked how I thought things were going. He probably would say, oh, my son's throwing his life away, he's going to college, he's pursuing some crazy degree that I don't even understand. But if you were to say, well, how do you think he would say his life is going? He would probably have to admit that I would say it was going pretty well. More about contacting former students. So we supply the contact information the KDE gives us, and they get it from you. So again, work with us on that. You might have better methods of contacting former students than the contact information that shows up in the YOYO. If so, go ahead and use them. You're free to use just about any method that you want to. I always hesitate when I say that because I think like, oh no, you're going to break down somebody's door to try to get an interview. We're not telling you to do that, but you can be creative in the ways that you go about trying to contact somebody. We heard of an interviewer who conducted an entire interview through text messaging. They texted the questions to the former student, and the former student texted answers back. That is a pretty intense way to do it, and I applaud the interviewer for being resilient enough to hang in there throughout that interview. I'm sure it took a lot of time and effort, but they got it done. If that works, hey, go for it. And the earlier you start, of course, the better. The window is April 1st through June 30th, so the end of school is during that period. Testing is likely taking place during that period. I know those can be difficult times, but keep your schedule in mind. I've gotten emails from people that say, well, we can't find any interviewers to do this anymore because school's out and they all went to the beach. I say, well, you should have thought of that earlier. One of the ways to increase response rates is to inform former students that you will be contacting them. We have drafted a letter and put it on our website, and we recommend that you send it out to former students approximately 2 weeks before you plan to start contacting them. So that could be very soon. We're halfway through March, just about halfway through March. And you can officially do the interviews starting April 1st, so that's not much more than 2 weeks. I'll show you where that letter is. So if you have a home address, you can send it to them. You can email them. If you have contacts through social media or a number you can text them to, any of those ways are fine. Be prepared to do the interview. That probably means that you want to be in a quiet area, free of distraction, behind a closed door, something like that. You're going to be talking to these people for a little while, and you don't want to be broadcasting your interview to the entire office. You need a computer with internet access because it's an online system. We recommend that you use some kind of phone, either a speaker phone or a phone with a headset, because you're going to be typing in answers as you're getting them. So you need to have your hands fairly free, and know who you're calling. Look at the list, and we put a little bit of information there. We put their disability type and their name. That's not going to tell you everything there is to know about a person, obviously, but you might know from looking at them, looking at their name, remember that it's a person that has some complex communication needs. And do you remember anything personal about them? How are you going to interact with someone that has communication needs? Think about that. You might look at their IEP to see how that was addressed while they were in school and use a similar method. And of course, if you remember something personal about them, that's a great technique just to start a conversation with someone. And we do want these interviews to be conversational. What if you just can't get in touch with someone? Like I say, that happens about a third of the time. We ask that you make 3 attempts to get a hold of them. Obviously, if the phone number doesn't work, I don't expect you to call a dead phone 3 times. But if they're just not answering, or you're getting voicemail or something like that, make 3 attempts, and after 3 attempts, assume that you're not going to be able to get a hold of them. What you can do, you still need to submit the interview, and I'll show you how to do that. You just click could not contact, and then you submit it, and it'll show that it's been submitted. What we don't want you to do is to complete the interview according to how you think they would answer. We want their opinions, and even if you know the answers to some of the things, it really gets in the way of some of the validity of this interview if you answer questions for them. Remember, you can interview the respondent in person if you want to. I mentioned that you could text it to them, you could do it through, or you could contact them through social media, but you could meet at the school, you could meet at a Starbucks or something like that. Whatever works for you. Be creative, but don't be invasive. It's not the end of the world if you can't contact somebody, and we don't want to invade someone's private life. But be creative. Try calling on evenings or weekends or different times. Don't call. We said we wanted you to try at least 3 times, so don't call at 2 o'clock on a weekday all 3 times. Mix it up a little bit, and you're more likely to get in touch with them. If you get a voicemail or something like that, you can use a script. We'll have this presentation online so you can refer to it. I'm not going to read it to you, but it's good to leave a message to let them know, and maybe they'll be looking for you to call next time. Maybe they'll call you back. Of course, if they do call you back, then you may, if you have some privacy, you can do the interview then. If not, you might set up a time when you can do the interview. What can you do to encourage participation? What if a former student is a little reluctant to complete the interview, but needs a little bit of encouragement? Well, first of all, let them know that it's voluntary. They can decline the entire interview. They can decline to answer any particular question that you ask. Let them know that how important it is. It's important to their school, the district, and the state. Not, again, we're not identifying who they are, but to have a bank of experiences about what former students' lives are like that'll help us improve transition services in the future. Make sure they know that what they say is protected and it's going to be kept confidential. Their name isn't going to appear in any type of report. Their responses will be in the aggregate, so it's going to be combined with a lot of other different information. A lot of other YOYO interviews will be combined with. And that someone can help them answer any or all parts of the interview if they want some help with that. Make sure they know it's not going to affect their benefits too. A lot of people are reluctant to answer questions about employment because they think, well, I might lose Medicaid, or I might have my SSI check reduced or something like that. We are not in touch with those organizations. We're not sharing information with them. So make sure that they know that that is not a concern at all. Some interviewing skills. Be a decent person. Be sensitive and listen. So realize that you're asking sensitive questions to young people, and they might become upset during the interview. You might ask them if they're working. They might really want to be able to be working, but they haven't been able to find a job. They've been frustrated with the services that have promised to help them get a job. So that can be tough for them. It can be tough for a parent if you're interviewing a parent. We don't want you to go to all lengths to badger questions out of them. You might have to skip the question. You might have to end the interview. I trust your judgment. I think you're more familiar with these young people than I am. So do what you can to calm them down and listen to them. And if you can't complete the interview, that's okay. But like I said, and I'll stress repeatedly through this, you want to make it a conversational thing. So you're really just talking about what's going on in their life. I mean, of course, we do have the questions all scripted out, but it's okay if you personalize it. You might need to rephrase questions. We want you to ask the questions the same way, but we want you to get full and complete answers as well. So make sure you do that in a neutral way if you have to rephrase something. So if you're asking, from the time you left high school, have you ever had a paying job? Former student says, oh, well, what do you mean by that? You wouldn't want to say, you never worked, did you? That's a leading question. That's a bad way to rephrase that question. You wouldn't want to say something like, well, I remember when I saw you over at Lowe's, seems like you were working. Now, again, you're leading them, so you don't want to rephrase a question like that. But a good way to rephrase that question is, do you go to work? Do they pay you? Did you ever go to work in the past year? Those, they're neutral. They're not going to lead a student or make them feel like they are supposed to answer that particular way. You might have to redirect them. We know from working with young people that sometimes they don't give answers that are completely relevant to the question that is being asked. be aware that this may happen, and try to keep them on point and redirect their response. Say, we can talk more about that later, but can we work on this question that I'm asking first? If you just can't get an answer out of them and they're talking about something else, you can enter their comments at the end of the interview. We do have an open-ended area at the end where you can put those other kind of responses in. But please don't just do that don't give us irrelevant information, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Probes. It can be difficult sometimes for a person that you're interviewing to fully understand what it is that you're trying to get across. So that doesn't always allow for the best data to be captured, and it doesn't encourage the former student to really explore their thoughts and experiences. So we use things called probes to address this. Over the course of the time that we've been doing this, we've gone back and forth between having more open-ended questions and more closed-ended questions, and we've switched a little bit more towards closed-ended questions for a few reasons. One of those reasons is because it's just a lot easier and quicker to analyze. Another reason is that when we were looking at all of the open-ended responses that we got to questions, we realized that they pretty much fell into a few categories anyway. So we thought, well, why not just put the categories in the interview and trust the interviewer to be able to pick which category it is that a young person is talking about. So as you're asking questions, their answers may not line up exactly with what some of the response options are. But if you probe a little bit, you might be able to get them to say something that will help you understand how to code it. So there's some general probes that can be used for just about any question. So they give you an answer and it doesn't really make a lot of sense to you. You can say, what do you mean by that? And then if you get them talking a little bit more, maybe it'll start to make a little bit more sense and you'll be able to figure out which option to choose. Or you can say, please tell me a little bit more about that. The more they talk about it, as long as you're on topic, hopefully it's giving you more information that you can complete the interview in the most efficient and accurate way. More specific probes about agencies and people. Please keep in mind that we don't know the name of every person or every agency in the state. We know what OBR is, but a lot of times people will put things like, the question might be something like, what agency or what was most helpful to a young person in school. And then they might say, the LTC. Well, I don't know what the LTC stands for. Maybe everybody in your district does, but we're doing this throughout the state. And when we're trying to code answers, there's probably something called an LTC in half the counties in the state, and I don't know what that does. So tell me what something is if, don't use the abbreviation at all, actually. But say, they got a lot of help from an agency that was specialized in helping young persons with autism find jobs or something like that, or they worked with the career center at a college. Those kinds of things are helpful. And in the same way with names, a lot of times people will say, Mr. Jones was very helpful in high school. And I'm glad that Mr. Jones was so helpful, but unless I know who he is, that doesn't really help us as we try to make reports that are helpful for the district and the state and everything. So are you talking about a special education teacher? Are you talking about a guidance counselor, a principal, a DOS, a custodian? I don't know, spell it out for me a little bit more so that we know what the person did that was helpful or who they were, or if they're unhelpful for that matter too. It's good to know not who they were. That also can kind of violate some confidentiality, although we're not going to report the names even if they do get written in, but it'll help us plan for the future. More specific probes, when we ask about activities, we ask a question about what do you do on most days, and some people will probably say, well, I stay at home, but that doesn't tell us a whole lot, and I think this is an open-ended question. So ask them a little bit more about what they're doing while they're staying at home. Are they just sitting around watching TV? Are they caring for family? Are they just hanging out with their family? Are they looking for a job while they're staying at home? Those kinds of things tell us a lot more than just staying at home. Sometimes they will say that they have to take care of children. And that again tells us something, but it doesn't tell us a whole lot about their experience. I mean, particularly with a question like, what are the reasons that you're not working or pursuing post-secondary education? Is it because you've had a child and you've decided to stay at home with them to raise them? Would you rather have some type of child care, but none is available or none of it is affordable? What is the ultimate reason there? I mean, obviously, parenting is a huge commitment, but for what is the reason why they're not doing something else instead of parenting? And that's not being judgmental. That's allowing us to advocate. You know, if a lot of people say that I can't find adequate child care, or daycare is just way too expensive, and I can't get a job, that allows us to report that to the state, and maybe something can be done about it. There are some particularly challenging items, and I know all of this is new to you this year, but these are new to everybody this year, and they're related to competitive employment. If you remember, that was one of the requirements from the federal government that we report on competitive employment, and they have several new concepts that they require to be included in that definition of competitive employment this year. They are trying to align their definition with the WYOYO definition, which is a little bit ambiguously defined. So we have come up with questions that we think will be the easiest to answer as is possible, but they are still going to be difficult questions. So basically they want to know if a young person who is employed is working with people other than just people with disabilities. We call that an integrated setting. Are they getting similar pay and benefits as coworkers that are doing the same job? And do they have similar opportunities for advancement as coworkers that are doing the same job? Now, these are really difficult questions for anybody to answer. I don't know that I can answer them in relation to my own job all the time. I mean, I might know something about, I know what my pay is, but I don't know what all my coworkers' pay is. So how do I know if I'm getting similar pay as my coworker? How do I know if I'm not always sure what my own opportunities for advancement are, and I know even less about what my coworkers' opportunities for advancement are. So those are tough. But the thing is, with all the other questions in the YOYO, I really want you to write what they say exactly as much as possible. I mean, after you probe and you rephrase the question, you redirect them if necessary. But ultimately, they're the ones that are going to determine which box gets checked. But on these, probably the honest answer for almost everybody is going to be don't know for at least one of them. And if that's the case, they will not be considered to be competitively employed. I mean, that's just kind of the definition that we're stuck with. So what I would hope that you would be able to do, go to the next slide here. They're not going to be considered to be competitively employed unless they answer yes to all four items. And if you remember, that can be definitely yes or probably yes. Those were, there's definitely and probably yes, definitely and probably no, and don't know are the five options. So what I would do if someone says that they don't know, they're not sure, they don't feel comfortable answering the question, try to get a feel for what kind of job they're doing. Because if you look at these questions, the first question is, as far as you know, do you work with people with and without disabilities? Well, obviously what we're getting at here is someone working in a sheltered workshop? Are they working in an enclave setting, something like that? Or are they doing the kind of job that a person with or without a disability could do, right? So get a feel for what kind of job it is that they're doing. Now, it could be that their job is that they're, say babysitting a young child with a disability and they have a disability themselves. Well, you could take that as that they only work with people with disabilities, but that's not really what we're asking. We're really asking, is this the kind of job that a person without a disability would be likely to have? So use a little discretion there, and I would probably check probably yes if they answered something like that. What if you ask the last question there, do you have similar opportunities for advancement as your coworkers doing the same job? And they say, I don't have a clue, man. I'm a year out of school. I don't know how much I can advance in this company, and I sure don't know about my coworkers' opportunities for advancement. Well, you might ask them some questions like, do you feel like your disability is keeping you from being able to have the same opportunities as your coworkers? Do you feel like it's possible that you get a raise or a promotion at some point in this job? And they might say, well, I'm not really sure, but I guess it's possible. Hey, I think that's good enough. I'm not thrilled with these questions, but we had to come up with something. This is what we came up with. So I would be fairly liberal in the kind of answers that you record there. I'm not asking anybody to be dishonest. Obviously, there will be times when people say no, and there are instances where that is the correct answer for sure. But I think all of these really get at, are they being discriminated against in some way? Are they being put in a different category because of their disability, or are they really fully integrated into their job setting in a competitive, integrated employment type of environment? So, and also give us some feedback. If you're asking these questions and you really don't feel like you have an idea for a better question, let us know, because this is our first year of doing this, and I'm a little worried about what kind of responses we're going to get. But you'll be the people that are interacting with these students and performing the interviews, so I am certainly open to feedback on how we can improve them. Directing former students to resources. So several years ago, in the early days of when we were doing a yo-yo, an interviewer came to us and said, I love talking to these former students, and I'm a person that likes to talk a lot, and sometimes they or sometimes their parents will ask me questions, and I want to be able to give them answers about how to find a job, about how to live on their own, those kinds of things. Can I do that? And we said, well, heck yes, you can. That's great. I'm glad you're willing to do that, and we like the suggestion so much that we have incorporated it into the yo-yo itself. So we have HDI's online resource guide. KIPSO is part of the Human Development Institute at the University of Kentucky, if you didn't know that. And they've done HDI has done a great job of putting together this resource guide. You can see what it looks like there. On the yo-yo, at the top of almost every page, there is a link to the relevant part of that resource guide that will direct you to resources that you can share. So keep that in mind, and I'll show that to you again as we go through the interview. So like I just said, at the top of each page, there's a link to that. So I would recommend having a resource guide open while interviewing. You can send links to the interviewees. You can tell them some information. You can have a phone number that you share with them or something like that. That's all good. You can be creative in the way that you do that. We have some additional information as well that wasn't part of HDI's resource guide, but is in a lot of ways more relevant to particular areas, that aren't statewide resources, but things like getting a driver's license, registering to vote, those kinds of things can be found in what we call the supplemental yo-yo resource manual. That's in our resource section too. And there are many other resources that HDI has to offer. We've got a lot of transition related videos on our resource page, so feel free to look at those yourselves. Feel free to share those. I think it's great information that we want to get out there in any way possible. We would also like to know what it is that you're sharing with former students. I think it's just good for us to be able to report to the state that this information is getting out there. So at the end of the interview, there is a place where you can check a series of boxes to tell us what information that you shared. You can even share your own personal information if you want to. You don't have to. It's totally up to you if you feel comfortable doing that. But you might be talking to someone and you realize I could really help you out with that. I don't have the time to do it right now, and we're in the middle of an interview. But hey, can I give you my phone number? You can call me back sometime, and we'll talk about this job that I heard of that sounds perfect for you. So that's up to you. And of course, book rehab, Medicare, Medicaid, SHLP waiver, specific information related to employment or higher education, those kinds of things are the things that we're most looking for. Also, we know that interviewers have a wide variety of experiences and expertise when it comes to dealing with what resources are available. Sometimes you guys are the go-to people that know more than anybody else in your region and are the perfect person to be talking to someone about these things, and sometimes you're not. So in those instances where you want to refer them to someone and you don't have the information yourself, we recommend that you ask them to contact the transition consultant from their co-op. There's 9 co-ops throughout the state. Everybody has a transition consultant. All the co-ops have a transition consultant. And we have fixed it so that the name and contact information for that transition consultant appear at the end of the YOYO. So you'll have the information right in front of you, and it's easy to share with them if they need information and you're just not sure where to point them yourself. All right, that's the PowerPoint part of the presentation. Let's look at the YOYO itself. All right, so you are looking at our website, www.kypso.org, and you'll see a bunch of good things on it. We're in the middle of doing the parent survey right now as well. We're contracted to do that, so that's not related to the YOYO, but it is on our page because it just seemed like the easiest way for folks to find it. You can see an English version and a Spanish version right there. If you scroll down on this main page, you will see where you can send a secure file. If you click there, it will take you to what is really a Qualtrics survey, but it also allows you the opportunity to upload a document. So that's a secure way of getting us information. I'm going to scroll back up and let's go over to resources because I referred to quite a few resources that were there. Here, the first one is the example of a letter to send to former students. So it's a Word document. It's kind of generic. You can personalize it if you want, but I take a look at that and send it out about 2 weeks before you start interviewing former students. Right below that is the spreadsheet that gives you the opportunity to add students to the YOYO. Again, I'm not going to open that up right now, but it'll open in Excel. Just fill out the information and upload it at that secure link. And there's a lot of good information under resources that you can look at during your own leisure. I'm going to click. I did that really quickly. I want to make sure that you all see just what I did. Most of what you do regarding the YOYO is going to be done through this data collection and reporting tab. So I'm going to click on that and it will ask you to log in. Now there's several things that you will need to do in order to gain access to the interview. The first thing you'll need to do is create an account if you don't have one already. So you can see over here, click here to register for your account. Go ahead and you can do that whenever you want. It'll ask you just a few questions. Make sure you get your district right. It comes from a drop-down menu. If you're listed in the wrong district, then we probably won't find you for one, and if we do, you'll see the wrong list of students. The second thing that needs to happen is that your DOS needs to approve you to be an interviewer. We need to get a note from them. In some cases, we probably already have that, but if we don't, then you're not going to see anything, even after you create your account. So yeah, have your DOS, email us and just say, I want to have Bob be an interviewer. And that'll be good enough for us to set them up as an interviewer. You can, or they can set you up as an interviewer for the entire district, or they can pick one particular school if you're a larger district and want to have interviewers assigned directly to individual schools. And the third thing you'll need to do is pass a quiz. So hopefully I am giving you all the information that you need during this webinar to pass the quiz. So you can do that as soon as I'm done. So I'm going to log into my account. Hopefully. Good. I'm always happy when that works. If you forget your username, you can email Judy and she can look it up for you. If you forget your password, you can click on the Forgot Password link and it'll allow you to reset it. All you need is your email address. I think that's all you need. Well, and you need your username to reset your password as well. So those things are pretty easy to address. So you'll open it up, you'll see something that looks like this. It'll give you information about Indicator 14 for the past year, for the state, for your co-op, and for your district, so you have some comparison points. You likely won't see all of these buttons at the top unless you're a DOS or your DOS has said, hey, I want this particular interviewer to also have these options available, but that's where you can go to look at individualized reports for your district. They'll be able to list the interviewers that are in their district, and you can look at old reports too. If you need to change your password or something on your profile, you can do it up there. But you will see once everything is, once you've passed the quiz, once you've got your account, and once you've had it approved by your DOS, you'll see a list of students, hopefully. If you don't, let us know if something went wrong. These are my fake students that I take great pride in making up every year. And you can see their SSID, or SID as we put it, is what you'll click on to open the interview. You can see their first and last name and their school, and you can see their status. So that status is always going to be either not started, open, or submitted. So open means that you've opened it, you've saved something, and you're going to come back to it. If it's submitted, that doesn't mean that the interview's been completed. It just means that you've submitted it. Remember, I told you, even if you can't contact someone, you can still submit the interview. Some of those have will likely have not been contacted, but still submitted the interview. That's what it'll say if the interview has been completed and submitted as well. About once a month, I will give more detailed reports to all the doses, just letting people know how things are going, so you don't have to go down a list. And it'll also tell how many interviews have actually been completed versus submitted with a could not contact or refused option. So let's interview someone who's not been started. How about if we interview Brian Johnson? If you remember, he was the nerd from the Breakfast Club. So I always liked Brian. And you'll click on the SSID and you'll see a little more information about him. So see, he's got a disability of autism. He's a white male, graduated with a regular diploma. If you don't remember what school he went to there, that's been listed, and the best contact information that we have for him. Like I say, I can't stress enough, the contact information is not all inclusive. If you've got a better way of contacting, by all means do it. I would recommend clicking the resource manual. So that's open. It will likely be blocked by a pop-up blocker, so you might have to turn it off for this, but I'd open it, you can see it there, and then I would just minimize it so you can refer to it later. But then I want to start the interview, so I'll do that. There's some instructions for you at the top. I'm not going to read through those, and we put a little script there for you. You don't have to read it word for word, but make sure you get the important information to them. Make sure they know it's not going to affect their benefits. Ask them that they've got a few minutes to talk with you, those kinds of things. Now, if you can't get a hold of somebody, you can type that up in here so that you can refer to it later. Let's see, Brian was at work at 12:00 p.m. on 3/13. So that'll let you know. It'll also, if it does contacts us and says, hey, I don't know if this interview is really trying to get a hold of anybody, and you've got some notes listed there, then I'll be more able to justify saying to your dose, yeah, I can tell they really were taking notes and they were trying hard and they left a lot of notes. They just weren't able to get a hold of somebody. We've had instances in the past where I know what interviewers are doing are waiting until the last possible day to do interviews and then just going through and clicking could not contact on everybody and submitting notes. So it looks like they've done everything. And doses have come to me and said, I don't really know if I think my interviewers are doing that much. And I've been able to say, it looks like that's the case because they all started on the last day. There's no notes and they just could not contact back to back for 25 students. So not that we're trying to police you, but the information is being recorded. So if you couldn't contact, you click could not contact, and then the submit button is there, and you would be able to submit it as such. Like I say, we recommend trying 3 times before you do that. But let's say that Brian was able to be interviewed. So I'll click yes, and I'll click proceed, and then it asks you as the interviewer, who was the respondent? Who was the person who was being interviewed? Is it the former student themselves, or was it their parent or guardian? I'm going to click parent guardian just so it shows what will happen. We'd like to know why it wasn't able to be the former student. What's going on that someone else has to be interviewed. It's not a terrible thing, but it's good information to have. If you click former student, that doesn't come up, obviously. There would be no reason for it to. So I'll click next, and then we get into the meat of the interview. The first question is about residence. Where did you live for most of last year? And again, I'll refer you to the resource guide. There's a link to it right up there. And there's also a section in the supplemental YOYO resources that deals with residence. So you can refer to either one of those. If someone says, I want to move out from my parents' house, they're driving me crazy, but I don't know what to do. That might be information that you share with them. But let's say that Brian is living in his family home. Again, I'm acting like I'm interviewing him. You would obviously not be filling this out this way. You'd be talking to him. But I'm just doing this to demonstrate what it's like to go through an interview. Then we get to the employment questions. So from the time you have left high school until now, have you ever had a paying job? And let's say that he says, yeah, I had a job. And let's say that you want to save it too, because you might be paranoid like me and think that your data is going to get lost. So you can click save, have a little pop-up window there, click OK, and then you don't have to worry about losing anything if you lose your connection for whatever reason. Okay, he said he had a job, so it'll ask you some follow-up questions about that job. Again, we've got some resources there related to employment, so feel free to use those if he asks any questions. Since leaving high school, have you worked for at least 3 months or 90 days? Let's say that he says, yes, he has. Say, how many hours per week do you usually work? Let's say, well, it's just a part-time job in a lab. Brian's he's a really smart dude. He's going to college and he just wants to have a little bit of income on the side. Were you paid at least minimum wage in your community? He says, yeah, I get that. Now, 11 is a little bit different. Which, if any of the following supports or accommodations did you receive at this job? This is a check all that apply question. A little cheat sheet for that is that questions that you can only answer one option are circular, but if they're check all that apply, they're square. We should actually have check all that apply written here so that you remember that. But if it's a check all that apply question, it's also a check none that apply. So maybe none of these apply, but maybe they all do. So you could do, whatever is relevant here. Some people might not understand the difference between a job coach and a personal aid or assistant. You can explain that to them. I think you guys probably know the difference. The job coach is really specific to that job, and there to help them perform improve their performance on the job. Whereas a personal aid or assistant is someone that's there to help the person with their own personal needs, but it's not specifically work related. Or do they have any special equipment that they're getting on the job? Now, let's say that Brian doesn't actually have any of these things, so we'll skip those, or we just won't answer that. I mean, we'll ask the question, but we won't record anything because he said, no, I'm not getting any accommodations or supports. We ask if they're still working, and let's say that he says, yes, he still is, and then we ask a question about how interesting he feels that his job is very interesting to not interesting at all, and Brian is very interested in his lab job, he says. So we click that. Now we have these the challenging questions, I call them. As far as you know, do you work with people with and without disabilities? Well, I don't know. I work in a lab. I've never asked everybody if they have a disability or not. Well, what do you do? Brian says, well, I'm really into physics, so I'm working for a professor in the physics department at Murray State University. I think that's probably an integrated setting, so I'm going to go probably yes there. As far as you know, Brian, do you get similar pay as your coworkers doing the same job? Well, Brian definitely knows that he does because he's researched this extensively. As far as you know, do you get similar benefits as your coworkers doing the same job? Well, let's think about, being in the real world. Maybe Brian is going to answer this by saying, I don't really get many benefits at all. He asked if I wanted health insurance, but I'm still on my parents. So I'd say I'm eligible for the same benefits, but I don't really get them. And I would say, as an interviewer, I would answer that probably yes. We realize that people are going to be in that situation. They may be getting public assistance. They may be getting Medicaid. The question really is, are you eligible for the same benefits? And really, it's asking if having a disability is keeping you from having the same opportunities as a person who doesn't have a disability. So I would say probably yes for that one, because it does seem like he's eligible for the same benefits. He's just getting them elsewhere. And as far as you know, do you get similar opportunities for advancement as your coworkers doing the same job? And again, let's say he says, well, I don't know. I mean, I'm just going to be doing this for like another year. It's a part-time thing. This isn't going to be my career, but I hope I get a job like this full-time at some point in the future. You might say, well, is that pretty similar to the experience of most of your coworkers? He says, well, no, they're all like grad students. Say, oh, well, if someone without a disability was doing your job, would they have similar opportunities for advancement? Could they get a raise? Could they get a promotion? They say, no, they're probably in the same boat that I am. So I would go with probably yes there again, because it doesn't seem like his disability is affecting his ability to advance. What's the main reason that you're not working or working more hours? Remember, we said he was working less than 20. So you can type in the box something here, and we'll say that Brian's going to say he's going to type that in and click next. From the time you left high school until now, have you been in any type of school or training program? And let's say Brian says, yes, he's going to college. This is a response that about 20%, and I think it's 18% most recently, of our former students say that they're going on to higher education. And some, even people with MMD, FMD classifications, sometimes they are going on to post-secondary education, so I wouldn't write that off. Just if you see, that they left by an alternate diploma, they've got a moderate or severe disability, it is still possible. So we asked follow-up questions about their post-secondary education. What kind of school or training program is it? And keeping it conversational, you might say, "Oh, where are you going to school, Brian?" And he might say, "Oh, well, I'm going to Harvard." Okay, we'll click a four-year college for that one. Have you completed an entire semester or term? Yes. What do you expect to get when you're finished with school? Brian, he wants a bachelor's. He probably wants more than that eventually. Have you ever contacted the Disability Services Coordinator at your post-secondary school or training program? And that's a mouthful, isn't it? You don't have to say at your post-secondary school or training program. You can say, have you ever contacted your Disability Service Coordinator? That's fine. And he might say, no. In fact, most of the people that answer this do say no. But that's an opportunity to say, do you need information on what that is? He might not even know. He might not know the benefits of contacting the Disability Services Coordinator, because there are some benefits to that in post-secondary ed. Do you live with your family while you go to school? He says, well, I do during the summer when I'm home, but not while I'm at school. Well, and that's really what we're asking. So, no, he's going up to Boston to go to Harvard. Just comes home for the summers. If you faced any problems in your post-secondary school or training program, if you faced any problems while you're in college, let us know what they are. And maybe he doesn't say anything. You don't have to write anything in the box if he doesn't. But if they do, document what they were. I'm going to click next, and we'll get into the community section. So, do you have a driver's license? And we know from watching the Breakfast Club that he does, although we asked him. And he said, yes. Are you registered to vote? Yes, that's why he has his driver's license. Please name the most important thing during high school that helped you in your life right now. Again, this is where we don't want you to put, a bunch of acronyms or a bunch of people's names, but you might list, let's see, the physics club was huge for Brian. So that. And we may recode that as like academic club or something like that. But that's what he said. I'd write it. Since leaving high school, have you had any contact with a counselor from Voc Rehab? If you click yes, that brings up number 32, which is describe the help you're getting, because Voc Rehab obviously offers a lot of different services. So just knowing that they did get some help doesn't tell us what that help was. It's useful to know, did he get tuition support? Did he get job coaching? Did he get driver training? There's a lot of different things that he could be getting. Let's actually say that he answered no to that. And then we'll click next. So that was the last question of the interview. Is there anything else you'd like to add about how things have been going for you since you left school? Maybe he says a lot, maybe he doesn't. You can write in whatever he says there. In the middle, there's information about the transition consultant. I put my own name there since this is a fake interview at a fake school in a fake district. But you will have your own information there for your region. And then there's a section for interviewer comments. If there's something that you need to relay to us about what went on during the interview, you can do so there. We will get that, but I'm going to leave that blank. And then I'm going to click next. And this is the item we talked about earlier. What information was shared with the respondent? Again, this is a check all that apply. Did we share anything with them? I don't think we did. So I'm not going to click anything there. But of course, if I did share information with them, then I would. So now the only options are I can go back or I can submit. I'm going to submit. It'll take me back to the list of students, and I see that Brian Johnson has been submitted. So that is the end of the interview. And really, that's the end of our webinar, unless there are any questions out there. All right, well, I don't hear any questions, so I'm going to log off. You know how to reach us if you need to, so feel free to do that if you have questions in the future or have any problems. Otherwise, happy yo-yoing, and thanks for joining us.